Welcome to the Better Agency Podcast. I'm Nicholas Ayers.
And I'm Preston Schmidley.
And we're excited for today's show because we got a really special guest I think you guys are going to really enjoy and get a lot of value out of. But before we get into it, let's hear from our main man, Flavor Flav.
Flavor Flav.
Yeah, boy.
Hey, yo, check 1, 2. This is Flavor Flav in the building for the Better Agency. Nicholas wants everyone to know how they need to listen to the truth that Nick and Preston are giving them. Flavor Flav's shouting y'all out right now. You heard me? So hold it down and keep making it a better agency. Alright?
And welcome again to the Better Agency Podcast. And today we have a very special guest on the show, someone I think that most of you who are listening have probably never heard of, you've never been acquainted with, and someone that I've been following on social media now for, I would say, maybe a couple years. And I think he has a lot of really great insights when it comes to our industry. He's in a different spot in our industry than what many of you guys who are listening might be used to. But I want to welcome the show. I'll let him get into it. Please welcome with me, Ryan Saridakis. Ryan, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me today. And I wanted to tell you I'm a big fan of what you got going on, man. I see you taking your content to the next level. And for someone who aspires to be a better content creator, you know, watching what you and Preston are doing with your Better Agency and just this podcast in general, it's super exciting. So thanks for having me on, man.
You are located right outside of Cleveland, correct?
Yeah, about 20 minutes outside of Cleveland.
You put a video up, I think a couple days ago, you taking a wind blower, like a leaf blower, to your car to blow off the snow.
Yeah. It gets pretty wild. We're in what they call the snow belt. We got Lake Erie right above us. So the weather can be very unpredictable. Like today, it was, just 50, 52 degrees. Yesterday was 55. A week before that, it was, 20 and like 18 inches of snow.
Oh my gosh.
I tell people when it gets like that 50-degree mark, I'm updating my will. I'm letting my loved ones know, hey, if I don't make it, A, I love you, and B, if you need extra food, you can eat me. Like, I'm okay with this. I've resolved this in my brain. 50 to like when it starts getting below like into the 40s or whatever, I'm seriously considering like I'm thinking I'm on the Donner Party, and I have no idea. And whenever I talk to people from cold weather states and I tell them this, they laugh at me and they go, they think it's some sort of weakness, which it is. I totally admit that it's a complete. I cannot survive in the snow, in the cold. I'm not thick blooded. My blood is as thin as the whatever's thin. It's
Whatever's thin.
It's thin and it's very deep. But then when they mock me for it, I tell them, look, it gets 110, 115 where I live. How are you gonna perform in that?
Like I don't do heat, man. Like, I mean, in Cleveland we get a little bit of everything, right? And so in the summer we don't get a lot of consistency, but in the summer we get pretty radical temperatures, man. You'll get chilly nights, but once July hits, man, it starts creeping in the 90s, which isn't bad, but it's the humidity, man.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
We go from like Alaska temperatures to like Florida temperatures. There's like not really an in between, but I perform better, I think, just as a human when it's colder. When it's hot, I'm a very irritable person. I'm always sweating, and I prefer the fall and winter actually over the summer.
You're probably easier to manage that though. Just most people are. I'd imagine that Nick will walk around at 110 degrees and nothing but a fanny pack. So I mean, he
literally
finds creative ways to manage.
Literally,
I don't have the same confidence Nick has.
No, I don't even wear socks. So. Just barefoot, one with the earth. Ryan, for the folks at home, tell us a little bit about, just give us the 30,000 foot overview, what you do in the industry, kind of give people just that familiarity. This is who I am. This is what I do. Yeah,
I mean, I guess just to give you the whole general backstory within a minute or two to keep this short as possible for your audience. I started this business in 2008 in the beginning of an economic recession, which a lot of us who've been around a while know that. Remember those times. I started the same month that the economy collapsed. At that point, there was really no work out there, so I just had to figure out how to be an agent. I knew there was opportunity, but I already started getting licensed, and it's kind of the story as that one scene from Wolf of Wall Street where it's like his first day on the job and the market crashes. He's like, now what the hell do I do? For me, it was similar to that with insurance. You know, we had the economy basically come down. I was in the real estate business, or like home improvement business, and getting ready to go real estate, but all that collapsed overnight. So had a friend in the business, brought me into the insurance world. I spent the first about 4.5, almost 5 years being captive. And after that, I really learned, like in that environment, I wanted to do more marketing work. And, you know, a lot of captive companies, they're a little restrictive when it comes to agents doing their own independent marketing. And I didn't want to have to be under those same restrictions. So, you know, I had a creative bone in my body and I wanted to put it to work. So I went independent, started becoming pretty fascinated with the marketing part and how agents generated leads. Because when I was captive, I mean, I worked for a good organization. They did feed me a lot of leads, but I was at the mercy of their leads. If I didn't feel that they were great, I really couldn't argue because there was other people doing more production than I was. So how could I say anything? As I came out, I started getting more interested in direct mail and how to take old direct mail leads and make them good again. And in my organization, I started planning in that era, and people were starting to adopt some of the methods I was using. And it kind of put me in light of lead generation for the first time around 2012. And shortly after, that company merged with another agency. I chose to not be a part of that merge. And I started working for a friend and as my upline. In that time period, I really had to learn self-lead generation because my friend didn't have a lot of systems set up for that. His model was just buy direct mail and go do your thing. So I did that for a little bit, started exploring Facebook ads. Turned out I was pretty good at that, and I was on the early stages of generating final expense leads on Facebook before a lot of people even figured out you could generate leads on Facebook. So naturally, in that moment, I said, I got to tell some people about this. Where do I go? Where do I find some agents to tell them about my new discovery? And I go to the internet. I came over to YouTube, and it turns out there was a couple people like David DeFord and a couple other cats there that kind of own that YouTube space. So it was a little intimidating to come there and try to make a presence there. So I was a new guy. I was just coming off of a really, really bad time of life. You know, I was hurting really bad, but I was on my bounce back, and my confidence wasn't at an all-time high to start competing with guys like those. So I came over to Facebook and started going and searching in Facebook groups, and all I found was one little group that had about 600 or 700 members at the time. But the thing is the guy that was running it was obviously doing something else in his career, so that he didn't have the interest to manage the group. So therefore, a lot of spam came in. It made it an undesirable place to go network online. So I went in there. I built a little bit of a presence. Started dropping some 101 Qs in that group and 101 tips. Very, very simple stuff for new agents to adopt because I didn't think there was much content out there on Facebook around that. And it only took about a week or two of doing that before I started getting a lot of attention within that community. Someone taking, like, I guess you can call it an influencer leadership role within that community. And then I said, hey, this isn't working because I don't have the controls. I can't kick these spammers out. So how about this? I'm going to open my own group on Facebook since there's not a single one that's devoted to life insurance specifically. And I announced that I'd build that group. I named it Tips, Tricks, and Closers. And the first day, about half of the other group I was in came over and followed me. Nice. You know, we got about 300 members my first day, and now almost 32 months later, we're about to round 10,000 members. We have the largest life insurance group on Facebook at the moment, unless there's maybe another IMO group that might have some members in there that are more than us. But as far as I believe, as far as an independent group, we're the biggest right now for life insurance agents.
And it's a fantastic group. I mean, I'm a PNC guy. People who watch this know I'm a PNC guy, but I get a lot of value out of that group just from the mindset, the sales strategies, and kind of the conversation that's there. It's a great, fantastic group. I would encourage anybody who's if you're in life insurance at all, to definitely be in that group. There's a lot of really good quality conversations there. If you're in PNC and you're trying to maybe get kind of a different perspective on things, I think it's also a really great group. And you're right, you drop a lot of dimes in there that I think are really, really, really cool. And I think they're very, very helpful. But I want to take the audience back. And if you're watching this right now on YouTube, which if you're not, you should watch this on YouTube. But if you want to listen to the audio only, that's cool too. But I want to take the audience back, and I'm going to share something on my screen something that you posted. I had no idea that this part of your story existed, but something that you posted back in July about a place that you were at, physically, emotionally, mentally, all the above, just not that long ago, maybe 3 years ago. And I'm gonna share my screen here, and I want to get into it here, but I'm gonna read this for the folks who are just listening to this first. You posted back on July 5th. Welp, we're officially homeowners. What a difference 36 months can make in your life. The video playing on the top left was filmed just 3 summers ago at the lowest point of my life, where I was practically beaten into submission. You can hear it in my voice if you take 30 seconds to watch it, which I'm going to play it right now. Let's go ahead and play this. We should be able to hear it.
Sleeping on the floor right now because it's 92% humidity. I have no electric. It's $5,000 to turn it back on. $5,300 to be exact. It's the 9th and my rent was due 9 days ago, and my bank account is $650 in the negative, and I got about 65 hours to my name. And my water's about to get shut off. Hit just about rock bottom. Feeling pretty defeated. Feeling tired. Been living like this for 3 weeks. Can't even change the oil in my car. I don't know, but I'll get out of it. I pull out of it. It's gonna take a lot of hustle, take a lot of prayer. It's gonna take a lot of everything. So hopefully this is the beginning of a great story.
Ryan, take me back 3 years ago. Take me back to that moment where you were at. I mean, you mentioned a lot of it in the video, but take me back to that moment and just where you were, and tell us how you got out of there, because today that's not you. That's not you at all, right? What I see in that video versus what I see today, and keep in mind I'm just an observer, is a 180.
Yeah.
Take us back to that day and take us to today and how you bridge that gap.
Yeah, man. Well, that was a really that was like a transitional period in my life. I mean, it was arguably probably some of the hardest years of my life. That was a period a couple years after just getting started as an independent agent. I was very up and down, and at the time I thought it had something more to do with talent or maybe just like work ethic itself. But in hindsight, it had a lot more to do with like kind of the people I was choosing to hang out with, problematic people who just invite problems into their life. I was making a lot of friends with those people because a lot of times those people are fun to hang out with. They're the ones that when you're single and you're bored with life, you're not happy. Those are kind of the ones you tend to move towards because they share the same experiences you are. And so I was spending a lot of time with those people, but was sending my life a little bit more into a decline. My priorities in life, my business aspirations weren't raising because I wasn't surrounding myself with people who have high business aspirations or are accomplishing higher levels in business. So just kind of losing sight of myself, had some personal things going on. And at that time, I think most agents can identify when you're trying to operate with all those things I just described going on in your life. It typically, in about 99% of cases, affects you financially. Your financial decisions tend to follow it. And it's really, and then all of those things kind of come together and create what I call situational depression. And you just start functioning different as a human. Your brain functions differently. Your confidence is different. And it's kind of a culmination of a lot of things that spiral and create this little storm. And I think a lot of agents can identify with that. For me, it just got really low to the point where there's times I was choosing between like buying leads or paying my bills, and that's like the hamster wheel of insurance, right? It's a terrible place to be because sometimes you can get stuck there for a really long time.
For sure.
And doesn't have anything necessarily to do with like your talent, doesn't have anything necessarily to do with even like your work ethic, because I think sometimes people can just keep working themselves really fast on a hamster wheel and burn out. That's where I was. I had an electric bill that, believe it or not, got backed up by like $5,000. The bigger it got, the more intimidating that bill got, and the more I was just like, holy crap, I hope they don't shut that off. So I was just kind of living on the financial edge for a while as I'm in this ground phase of really trying to be a entrepreneur. And when I say entrepreneur, meaning cutting the cord from a captive lifestyle where they really there's a lot of support. There's financial support, there's lead support, there's office support, there's admin support, to coming over to independent. And my setup wasn't really that. So
That's a hard time to make that transition.
yeah, and if you're not locked in mentally, like, and you have any weaknesses up there, those things can combine. So at this point, like, a lot of my bills got backed up. I had a Verizon bill that backed up a couple $1,000 because I had to sell the phone to get some cash. Like, I mean, I've been at like pretty much the lowest financially most people can go through in their adult life. So at that point where I shot that video, I even had an agent in my house. I was trying to help out. I wasn't even equipped to help anybody. I wasn't even in a situation. I wasn't even in a situation where I was equipped to be helping somebody, but I was trying. And I think a lot of people in leadership and insurance have been there, where you're not even really fit to do the job, but you try because you want to. And that's the scenario with him. He had just as many problems as I had, though, and ultimately he
misery loves company.
Yeah, and ultimately his were worse. His resulted in some decisions in his life that didn't work out for him, and he tried to even take his own life, like in my house. So at that time where that video was shot, that was right after all of these things I described happening, and I was at an all-time low, and then my electric got shut off. So
yeah,
I didn't have anyone to go to borrow $5,000 from.
Those promotions in life insurance are kind of like military promotions during wartime. It's like you sell your first few policies. Congratulations, here's an agent to train. You're like, what?
Yeah. So yeah, man. At that moment, I don't know. I just kind of I lost my electric. Lights were out. I had a dog to take care of. I was sleeping on the floor because it happened in I think it was like August or September. So it was super hot outside. I remember that, and I was just sweating. I was like,
well, you can even hear in the video, if you listen to the video, you can even hear the crickets in the background. I think that what's amazing, like the thing that stuck out to me was, in at least where we live, you hear the fluorescent hum of lights, you hear TV in the background, you hear noise. In your situation, it's so amplified because you can even hear the bugs outside.
Yeah, like I had. It's funny you noticed that, because I guess I never thought of that myself. But so I remember sitting there just going, damn, man, this is like as worse as it can get. And in a weird way, the reason I recorded that moment is because like that was like a really shitty spot to be, but it was somewhat liberating, knowing like it probably, God willing, my health stays intact. It probably isn't going to get any worse than this. Like, I'm behind on my rent anyway. Luckily, I had a super cool landlord at the time who was a friend of the family, and he was working with me. But ultimately, later on, he had to evict me because I couldn't catch up my bills. But I was ultimately in that moment. I said, "This has got to change, man. This has got to be the worst it gets." And when I found myself sleeping on the floor just to catch a breeze, in that hot night, I said, I got to do anything. I just need to generate money because I've just slipped into this pit where I can't even afford to like get out. So I started getting online and looking, and very quickly I just said, enough is enough. It's going to be a humbling experience, but I got one of those. I got an Uber app. I signed up to drive for Uber, and I immediately started waking up. I didn't have electric, nothing else to do, so I started waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going to the airport. And I'd sit in front of either the airport or I'd sit in front of all the hotels downtown Cleveland. And we had a business convention center down there. And I strategically would post up and try to get early morning surges when no drivers were out. I started watching Gary Vee, right? I was trying to get my mindset right. And that's all really cool. I started watching a little motivational stuff, stumbled across Gary Vee back in like 2016. And when you're, I think he's great content if you're struggling. I think it tells you a lot of stuff like you really need to hear. So he resonated with me, that kind of tough guy attitude, get your crap together, quit whining. And ultimately I looked at my life, I'm like, man, like a lot of the decisions, a lot of the reasons I'm here, it's just dumb stuff, like dumb mentality stuff. And then it's all my fault and I can work out of it. I can go work 18 hours a day. It's not what I'm doing. And I woke up and I just kind of started doing that Uber hustle, right? Every morning I'd start making 125, 150 bucks. I started doing that for 3 months. Next thing you know, I'm not only paying my bills, I'm getting ahead a little bit. Then I was able to create enough cash to start buying some leads. Then I bought some leads, wrote some business, built my account back up a little higher. And next thing you know, I started, once I had a little bit of money saved up, $5,000, $6,000, I started asking myself, like, how do I not end up in that position again? And the first thing I did was realize that there's a lot of weaknesses in my own work habits, even to this day, that I've accepted to myself that I don't think I'll ever be good at. I don't think I'll ever aspire to be good at. So therefore I need to delegate it. I used that little bit of money that I made and invested in a person, because I knew I really said from here, I want a great story. I want to go from nothing to $1 million. And like, how am I going to get there? And I had a real come to Jesus moment with myself that there was a lot of weaknesses that I've had since I was a child. Organization's one of them. Procrastination's one of them. I'm not a fan of the phones. Just being on them in general. I don't care if the call's coming to me. I get more inbound calls than I can handle. I have a team that manages it now. I don't do well on the phones. So I outsourced, I figured out a list of all my weaknesses, put a post up, said I'm ready to hire someone, $500 a week with raise. And I put literally a list of all my weaknesses on a post. I can probably go back and find it. And I said, this is a person that I'm looking for who has strengths in all these areas. And like, believe it or not, like 30 people raised their hand and were like, I'll do it. And I just happened to have a friend who took the job. And since then I was able to delegate all the things that made me not like what I was doing, like phone activity, organizing paperwork, administrative stuff.
There's a few things I want to unpack there, Ryan. First of all, I think this is an important thing because delegation is a very difficult thing in our industry, and I think that this is human nature, right? Most people I talk to when it comes to delegation, I know I've had this conversation with Nick about his just pattern of delegation, and I've had to have this conversation had with me from other people as well. It always feels easier that first time. You're like, let me just do it. I'll just do it, right? Because that training and delegating and I think most agents do that. And as I said, I think this isn't specific to insurance, but since we're talking about insurance, I see a lot of agents struggle with that. They're like, well, it's so much harder to delegate. And in that front phase, it is, right? Because you're like, well, I have to train them. I still have to do it, but I have to do it at like half pace to show them how to do it. And then I got to kind of let them do it, but I got to watch them do it. And, and there's like that inefficient front end, but I'd like to talk a little bit about, you did it, right? You looked that difficulty in the mirror. You recognized you call it weakness, the points of yourself that you just didn't have the same, these specific skill sets just didn't have the same amount of points allocated to them for you, right? And so in that, you outsourced, you hired, you delegated. I would like to talk about what that did for you very like tangibly, because I know there's that initial curve, like you got to make sure that they can succeed, because drive-by delegation isn't either fair or it generally doesn't work unless you find a rock star. And then you might lose a rock star, which would ultimately suck a lot. So talk to me about what that delegation really did for you and how that impacted your business, like as tangible as possible.
Yeah, I mean, great question. As far as like what it did for me, I mean, the short story is I went from that year where I lost everything. I think I netted after expenses about $17,000. The following year, after learning how to delegate, I did $170,000, and then the year after that, I did 1.3 million. So yes. That was most of that, yes, work ethic, but a lot of that was learning to delegate tasks that I just knew I wasn't good at. Because if you're not good at something, you're probably not going to try hard at it either. You're not going to intentionally focus on doing that job well if you don't like it. I think it's human nature. That was one thing I accepted about myself. So I found someone that was on all those areas that I was weak. So what that was able to do, and I talk to agents about this all the time. I said, delegate some of those tasks that literally a $12.50 an hour to $15 an hour employee will be happy to do. Not someone that I wasn't online looking like who's a virtual assistant that I can give $80 a week to do these three things. I mean, I guess I get the heart when agents do that. Like their heart's in the right place, but their business mind is not. We're looking for how do I spend as least bit as possible to get as most done. It's not a healthy formula for delegating.
Being cheap's expensive, yeah.
It really is. It makes it harder. And then what happens is people try that route and then they have a bad taste about delegating. They think only they can do everything.
Right.
And not to get too far off on that, I just kind of recognize the stuff that I just habitually was not good at. And it's not that I couldn't have worked on them, or it's not that I had to get the assistant to do it. In my mind, I felt I just lost a year and a half. I need to now do 80 to 100. I had like a mathematical formula put out. I said I need to do like 80 to 100 hours of work at my current rate to get enough money together to build this idea that I have. And I eventually figured out that's impossible. I need to delegate. So if I have one person 40 hours on managing the basics of my ads running, handling inbound calls when they come in, sending out thank you mail, reaching out to lead companies when I need new leads. Like, why should I spend my time researching that when my time in the field is worth $100 an hour, $200 an hour, and someone else's time researching is worth 12. When I started understanding that mathematical exchange, that when I'm sitting in front of somebody, whether it's selling insurance or even selling a marketing package or selling leads, I know that my time is worth 100, 200, 300, 400, depending on what the task is. It's silly for me to spend time on doing things.
100%. That's huge.
Someone that I hate doing, that someone who would be thrilled to make $15 an hour, have a cool, stable working condition, and they like doing those tasks. Therefore, they're going to do it better than I can do it anyway.
Yeah.
Once I started accepting that, so much of my time started going into the areas that, for one, I was good at doing, which made me excited to go to work. When all you have to do is do the stuff you're good at, you're probably going to be really good.
It's much better.
I mean, you don't deal with as much personal failure when you put yourself in that position. Therefore, your confidence goes up. So to answer the original question, like what that did for me, I would call it like a culmination of one thing after another. It put me in a position to spend now my 50 to 60 workable hours a week focused on generating revenue. You'd be surprised how much money you can make for yourself when your only focus is on revenue generation, especially in the first year of your business. I feel like people are trying to go way deep down the wrong path and branding and all this stuff that they should get to when they make their first like 200,000 or 300,000. When you delegate properly, you can focus all of your time on doing things that generate revenue for your business. And once I did that, my revenue didn't 2x, it went from like a 10x because I was able to focus all the time on selling. So once that happened, I kept myself on a low budget and I reinvested some of that 10x money into another person of delegation, because now that I was making more money and generating new business, and now we're growing Facebook group, it pulled me out of the field, put me in the office, and I realized now we have inbound traffic coming in that I don't want to have to handle myself. So I said, let's take some of that money, let's get another person in there. I reached out to my group. I said, I think an agent in this position would be awesome. Let's get an agent who doesn't want to be in the field anymore, but would like to be on the phones talking to agents, helping agents. And ultimately, I hired this guy Josh, who's been a great acquisition for us, and he's been a great person for us. And we added him to the team, along with another guy that we have named Jeremy. He came from another vendor, and just said, I'm super excited about what TTC is going on. So now the culmination of proper delegation helped build a brand, because all the weaknesses have been covered by multiple people. I think people run businesses and just feel like their customers or the people who work for them just have to deal with their weaknesses or their things that they don't want to do. And I just think that's not the case. Once you start delegating, you can cover the full circle of what I think creates a good business. And then once you do that, word of mouth happens naturally. You don't have to ask for referrals. You don't have to beg for them. Good businesses tend to generate their own traffic because of that, and their own revenue without you having to go out and hunt for it. So a big thing that preaches delegation, and that's it.
There was a a moment 3 years ago where you were sleeping on the floor trying to feel the breeze so you weren't dying of heat stroke, worrying if the bugs from the outside might come in and bite you and give you some sort of infectious disease. The power was shut off. The phone bill was shut off. You had probably no food, no jobs, our pets' heads are falling off, type moment. And that moment was real. And then fast forward, we have it on the screen here, fast forward, and now you're here. You got a family, you got the home, you got the picturesque, and I'm sure there's always going to be issues, but you came from there. You literally started from the bottom, and now you're here. And what I find the most captivating thing, a part of all this, is not just the inspiration behind that, but I had a mentor years ago who told me this phrase, and it stuck with me. And it's something that it's almost like something I've adapted in my own mantra. And it's that if you don't quit, you win.
Yeah.
Most people lose in life, in business, in reaching their goals because they quit. Yeah. And I'm not saying there's not a time where you pull the ripcord, but it probably would have been really, really easy for Ryan back 3 years ago to say, you know what? Screw this. I'm not, this isn't for me. I can't do this. I need to go, selling meth on the streets of Cleveland sounds a lot more appealing than this. But you didn't give up. You didn't quit. And I think there's a lot of valuable lessons in that. You mentioned, when you're doing something you love, you don't get tired of that. Reminds me of another saying, one of my very favorite fighters of all time. I'm a big combat sports fan, and one of my favorite MMA fighters of all time, BJ Penn, said in an interview one time, he said, "You know what? You never get tired when you're kicking someone's ass. You just never get tired. Like you get tired when you're taking the punches, but if you're just pounding something, like that never gets tiring."
Right.
And I think it's really, really cool. We said before this call, I think you and Preston, there's a lot of similarities in your guys' stories, and it's really interesting to see how far you've come. And that I want congratulations on pulling yourself up out of that. I would, the resolve and the tenacity and the mindset. It was the mindset. You tell agents, hey, you want to be successful. That we talk to agents all the time. They say, I want to have this kind of agency. Okay, great. You've got to do this. And you should do this. And make sure you do this.
Well, a lot of people want the view, but the moment you go, well, that's the path to the mountain, they go, nah, never mind.
Yeah, I don't know that I want it that much now.
Yeah.
Well, you know what too, man? It's like, I think also a lot of, and I think it's people in general, but I say agents because that's who we communicate with and help every day. I think that, in many ways, they believe they have to be this like abnormal talent to be able to even create a six-figure life for themselves. Where they can clear $100,000 after taxes, meaning they can live within reason of whatever house they want to live in. They can drive the car they want to drive. They can send their kids to the school they want to send them to and have money left over to take 2 vacations a year and still save money. Like, to me, if you're accomplishing that as an agent, you're successful.
You've won, yeah.
But I think a lot of agents believe they have to have like this abnormal level of talent or work better leads than what they're getting in order to have that. And man, if there's anyone even listening right now that's even asking himself, am I capable of accomplishing like a successful lifestyle in this business? The one thing I want to tell you is like, it's so much of it comes down to mindset. Like what Preston said, it's starting with your brain. It's starting with with just your general attitude towards accomplishing that. I think when you want it bad enough and you're willing to bulldoze and you're willing to take those little wins that you'll get along the way and reinvest those wins, meaning money, and you put that back into your business and you start alleviating some of the pressure that falls on you. I think a lot of agents and people, when they start businesses, they start extracting those. When they start gaining some ground, they start pulling those profits really quickly because they want to feed themselves. Especially they were in a situation where I was, where they were really broke right before. And finally go, I'm sick of it. They start hustling. They get like $5-6 grand ahead, and then next thing you know, they're wearing a $300 pair of shoes. And
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting pivotal moment for a lot of agents. I can say for myself, I didn't fall into that. I think enough Gary Vee coaching in 2015 beat it into my brain to not do stuff like that. And I just think a lot of agents are more capable than they think.
Ryan,
over
I
time.
wanted to ask you something on that. From my observation, this is just something that I kind of have an inclination on. Are you a first generation insurance agent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait.
You know, it's like
Wait.
you didn't inherit an agency, or like it's
No,
not like you came
no,
into it from. It's
no.
interesting. I feel like and this might be standard in a lot of sales industries, but there's a lot of for first generation agents, I see a lot of immigration stories, like immigrants. You know how like immigrants, they come over here, they go through the hardest conditions, they make it, they do it the legitimate, they create a business, they toil in something most people wouldn't want to toil in, and they struggle and they scrape and they build and they make it so that their lineage has something in the promised land, right? And I have a lot of respect for that. I've kind of noticed a correlation between like an immigrant story and a first generation insurance agent story. And there tends to be a lot of parallel in the struggle. And you know, when I heard that from you, I felt like that. And so this is actually something I just wanted to mention, you know, as a kind of a lesson to, because it's like, and I don't mean this to exclude like second generation and third generation agents aren't good or can't be
Preston
great.
hates second and third generation insurance agents. Everyone.
I'm kind of a hybrid between a first and a second, because I grew up in insurance, but I had to figure it out for my own self in a lot of ways, and so I kind of had a little bit of both. I think second and generation they have some padding there, right? And so I think that there is an element when a first generation agent has to, like, you don't have a choice but to acquire the wisdom the hard way, and because you don't have the mentor, right? Second and third generation most likely have a mentor, they have a bloodline of trainers, right? And so what I want to say is to the young agents that don't have potentially mentorship, that don't have that, you know, that person to look to and guide, and you might be resonating with the struggle of Ryan. I'd like to help you kind of resonate with the success of Ryan a little bit, and understand the bridge there. You know, it's just like, that's the part when Nick was like, Preston, before this, he was like, Preston, I think that you and Ryan have a lot in common. This is really cool. I was like, awesome, dude, that's sick. And then when I found out it was a struggle, I was like, oh, that's less fun. You know, it's less sexy, I should say. But I have more respect for that. For the agents that are in the pits right now, right? You're in what I call the mud, and you're trying to climb through it, and it might not feel like, you know, you're too far from the finish line, so you can't go back anymore, but you can't yet see, you know, you can't see a finish line, but you can't see a start either, right? You're kind of in no man's land. I think for that agent, it's important to have a sense of humility and a stubborn knowing, like a stubborn knowingness about, like, I'm going to have that $17,000 year. I'm going to make it through the $5,000 bill. You have to kind of go through those little things, right? And you have to have the humility to be willing to have that $17,000 a year, to be able to have the $130,000 year, to be able to have the $1 million year. Like there is a journey to that. It's not 0 to 100. And I think if you have the humility to understand that anything, I'm sure there were plenty of months there in Ryan's story where if all he netted in his life was an air conditioner and the ability to power it, that would have been a promotion. You know, I can connect to that. So for those agents, remember, it's like just the small victories. They might feel, you know, when you're in that moment where you're getting beaten up and life is just, it feels like it's all against you and it's you against the world. It might feel like I'm throwing in the towel. But it's those small victories that lead you to be able to have those big victories, and that willingness to go, I'm going to take this small victory, because I mean, for where you're at, it's a big victory. I mean, you know, if you can go from a $5,000 negative power bill to a $17,000 a year, that was a victory. It's not the victory you wanted in the time you wanted it, but it is the victory you needed to go where you need to go. And so it's like, have the humility to accept that and continue on your path. And don't stop, you know, unless you are in an absolutely horrible spot, that is like potentially like life impactful in a really, really bad way. Keep going. You know, I think that's for all three of us. You know, we all have a level of success that I think can be attributed to that sense of just chin, just the ability to take a hit and go, oh.
You know, Preston, you said one thing that kind of resonated that I wanted to touch on before I lose the thought. And that's like, and it's celebrating victories. The one thing I did in 2017, and my mom, who recently passed away, God bless her soul, was one thing she put out there for me when I was going through like the worst part. This was in 17, like I was just really, really struggling. And she told me, she said, at the end of the day, Ryan, you got to get yourself a win. You got to like come up with a win. It's like the worst year of your life. Financially, you've fallen in just about every category you can think of. You need to come up with a win. At that time, I was smoking cigarettes. That was a big one. It was too expensive for me, but I still found ways to buy a cigarette. And I said, you know, I agreed with her. I said, I do need a win. And the first thing I did on my birthday in that year was quit smoking. And then I got through like the first 90 days, which was the longest I ever got through prior. It's been coming up on 4 years now, no, 3 years, 4 years, something like that. 4 years for me. And that's kind of what started it. And she was right. It was a non-monetary victory. So for some people, that's weight loss. For some people, that's quitting smoking. For some people, maybe that's quitting drinking or even doing drugs. Whatever it is, like no matter where you're at, you don't always even need a monetary win. Sometimes those wins happen. And what will come from that is at least one step of confidence that you didn't have that will put you in a position to take on the next win, and you'll approach it differently. If all
it changes your status. It changes the way you see yourself. Right. And I don't mean status is like I'm driving a Benz. Like if that's the type of status you want, then that's cool. Like I'm not here to like status is a great thing to leverage in marketing. I love status, not personally, but I like to leverage it from other people. But, you know, it's like I think that there's a place for it. But I think it's important to be able to look in the mirror and go, you're a good man. You know, like that's important, right? To be able to just have that level of self-respect and those small, you know, the ability to stop smoking. Yes, there's a few lessons in that. Like you've always found money to pay for cigarettes when you couldn't pay your power bill. That's a priority issue. That's the priority issue, right? And so, but that's the interesting part. When you are in those slums of your life, you know, when you're in the mud, it's interesting what people do when, you know, when buying cigarettes, that's like taking the gas right out of the tank, but it's easy to do when the gas is also edible, right? You're like, I'm starving to death and I need something to feel good about myself. It's easy to be really, you know, make the wrong decision there. It's a very easy thing to do. And so I agree with you there, man. I think that's really important. And yeah, I got mad respect. I got mad respect for what you did to get out of that, because, you know, being able to have those small victories, and it doesn't matter if it's, dude, if you had a positive week, I think that, you know, when you're going from negative 5,000, you made $300. Like actually one of the biggest victories that you had was, in my opinion, at that time, when you were like, I made a decision to drive for Uber, dude, when you're negative 5,000 and you're pulling 100 a day, like that's, you're like, oh, I'm printing money, you know? And I think that is, you know, your mindset shifted and you allowed yourself to look in the mirror and go, you're becoming a better man, Ryan. Today you are better than you were. And I think once that's what the brain latches onto, and that becomes the goal in the journey, is to kind of shed some of these layers of yourself that didn't serve you, and to identify the places you need to go in your own life and professionally to become the version of you that you strive to be. You know, that's where the magic happens, man.
Thanks, man.
Well, and to that point as well, I mean, you see where Ryan is at today, and you like when I see you engage in your group. Number one, I love when you take a very harsh stance on, you know, this is a community for agents, and so, you know, you take a start. So I find that stuff entertaining when you get in that vein. But when you are talking to agents in your group, and when I see you engaging when I see this. And now I have context to what that was not that long ago. It built, I think, to Preston's point, it built a lot of character to where now when I see you working with agents, it makes it that much stronger. It makes it that much more genuine. It makes it that much more, I don't want to say respectable, because it's not like it was, but there's a power in it. There's a power because you had to go through a process to become a product. And that product today, and so many people neglect the process.
Yeah.
but and they wonder why they're not the product that they want to be. But
Right.
when I see it today, and I see the guy you're shaving today, but I see the long beard, I see you smoking the stogies, I see you at the poker table, I see you with confidence, I see you with authority, I see you talking to people and giving them good advice. That didn't just happen. That was a
Yeah.
process, and there was a character building to where now what that is today is so much more valuable. It's really much more. It's that coal that became a diamond, and it's got value to it, and I think it's powerful. And yeah, again, if you're not in Ryan's group, we'll link it down below. We'll talk about it here, but you really need to get in that group. I think I don't care if you're selling insurance. You probably wouldn't want me saying this, but or if you're selling widgets or cars or whatever, like there's value in it. Right.
Ryan's like, no, please only sell insurance.
Right. But if you're in the insurance industry, if you sell life insurance in particular, because that's what the conversation is about, there's a lot of gold bullion that's being freely distributed in that group and with the advice, because it comes from a place of character, which I think is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything you said about the group, man. And yeah, anyone's listening, as long as you're in the insurance space, we are focused generally on life insurance as our topic in our community, but we still invite obviously P&C agents and other agents of other lines. And a lot of times they want to know more about life insurance. We have some of the best, hitters in our group. We have Chris Smith. He is like an underwriting like maniac. So he's pretty much in every single thread. If someone has a life underwriting question, he knows the carriers like the back of his hand. We got another guy on that here.
Most of our audience is PNC specific, right? And PNC is independent specific. I would challenge every PNC agent to dive into this. And I say that because I managed a pretty wide territory of a life insurance company for a few years, and I learned so much. I sold a few thousand policies, and that taught me, and that used to be my Achilles heel in the insurance space, was the ability to sell life, and it became my strength. And it wasn't easy to acquire. Similar story to you, Ryan. I actually kind of feel like we need to do a second podcast one time. But the reason I would advocate for a PNC agent to do this, your average PNC agent is just happy to slang a 20, 30 year, $300,000 term, call it a day. They can pay for the house, bang, bang, boom, quick underwriting, easy peasy. I got the line of business. I rounded out the account, retention's higher. I'm good. It's like, whereas, Ryan, I'm sure you're used to this. You walk into a house, you might, depending on the need, you might sell a term and a whole life to the wife and the husband. You might get IULs on the kids. There's an accident and a health policy. You walked into that with nothing. You walk out with 10 policies or something, right? It's a very different approach than a lot of independent agents or PNC focused agents really think about. And I think it's very important to look at that and learn some of those sales strategies, because the PNC side has neglected life in a very, very heavy way, in a way that there's so much premium on the table, so much money. And that's premium that you could technically make quite a big paycheck. I mean, if you're talking 100% commission on first year premium or whatever the contract is for people you represent, I mean, you're not talking a small chunk of change if you can enhance that sales process. So I would strongly advocate, as somebody who has that experience myself and has had to acquire that knowledge the hard way, I would surround yourself with winners in that space, because the moment that you can bolt on a solid, and I'm not talking just slanging a few terms, I'm talking the moment you can bolt on a real life insurance generating part of your business to what you already have as the bread and butter, you'll start to realize, wow, I left a lot of money on the table. And not only that, I mean, I can say this because I've had to deliver a check to somebody. You do the right thing by your clients. I think that also shifts the way that you view life insurance when you've got to show up and deliver a check when a husband couldn't be present. And, that kind of makes you see things differently. So, by doing that, you obviously provide a higher level of service to your client base, but you really also help put more presents under the Christmas tree.
Yeah, for sure.
Ryan, I want to thank you so much for being on the Better Podcast. I think this was a fantastic conversation, and I'd love to stay in touch more. And again, if people want to find you, if they want to get into if they're an insurance agent wanting to who fits the mold and wants to join the Facebook group, how can they find it?
I would go to Facebook and then go to the search engine, right? You can look under groups. You can just go to Facebook search, type in life insurance, tips, tricks, and closers. And we should be the first group that pops up. There's almost 10,000 members in there. Maybe by the time this airs, there might be more. But we're about to round 10,000. And we got some really exciting stuff coming up next year. We're going to be doing like new member giveaways. We're going to be involving new members a lot and doing more formatted stuff in the group, having actually more regimented content. And we're looking to do our own podcast. So Nick and Preston, I'll be sure to be reaching out to you guys to invite you to the group. I'm not sure if Preston's in the group, but we'd be happy to invite him in. And
I'm about to be.
We'll know him as well. And I look forward to bringing you guys on whenever TTC gets our own podcast. You guys will be at the top of that list too.
Absolutely. Again, if you're listening to this on our website, which hopefully you've been to our website, www.betteragency.io, and you're listening to this podcast, we will link it down below. If you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. That'd be great. But then also we'll put a link down to the Facebook group as well. So take out some of the steps and the guesswork on how to find Ryan and his group. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Better Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining, everybody.